Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to our Kartik month special. Yesterday we were talking about the significance of the various demons being slayed by Krishna and the anarthas that they represent within us. Various types of anarthas, right from the pseudo guru to the pseudo devotee, to false pride, to speculation, to a whole set of bad habits. So many different things we talked about of the different asuras and what they represent. What to speak of the asuras, even the Lord's association and release of Nalakuvara and Manigriva, and then the Lord's pastimes with Lord Brahma. All of that we discussed yesterday. And today, of course, is the most auspicious day of Govardhan Leela. Although today we will not be covering that pastime, it will come later on in this week. So we'll continue with pastimes from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10. Yesterday, we talked about Pralambasura, who was killed by Balaram. And that Pralambasura represented a false devotee, a devotee in disguise, right? So he comes disguised as a cowherd boy, although he is an asura, but his main purpose is to destroy Balaram and Krishna. So right before the Pralambasura pastime, there is a small forest fire that was extinguished in the forests. And this small forest fire represents communal disharmony among the Vaishnavas. Sometimes we have differences of opinion and sometimes very strong differences of opinion. And that may result in conflicts even among Vaishnavas. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Chaitanya Shikshamrita refers this first extinguishing of that other fire as intercommunal discord among Vaishnavas. So today we're going to go to chapter 19 of Srimad Bhagavatam and maybe chapter 20 and 21 if we have time. So the boys are enjoying themselves with Krishna and Balaram. They are happy every morning. They are eager. They are eagerly looking forward for grazing the calves, grazing the cows, because they are anticipating spending that time with Krishna. So throughout the night, all of the cowherd boys are just simply anxious for daytime, for daybreak to happen, because they know that means one more day spent with Krishna and Balaram. Similarly, as the boys would come back home, as they were departing in the morning and all day they were gone, the gopis would experience deep separation, always thinking about the Lord and waiting for him to return. So the acharyas explain that the daytime the Lord spent with his friends, many pastimes and games in the 12 forests of Vrindavan. So the boys would travel a great deal of distance. They were not traveling short distances. In the killing of the asuras and the various pastimes, they traveled quite far on foot. So when nighttime falls, it is the turn of the gopis to have their association with Krishna. And the acharyas explain, when the gopis met with Krishna, then Vrindavan, the dham itself would contract, and the dham would expand during the daytime like a lotus flower, blooms under the beautiful rays of the sun. So similarly, the lotus flower slowly contracts when the sun goes down. And therefore, Krishna was also able to meet with the gopis during the night. So which makes you wonder, does Krishna ever sleep? Because he's busy in the day with the gopas, he's busy in the night with the gopis. So here the boys are so much enjoying themselves with Krishna. And one day, as they were busy, what was happening is that they were so busy playing, they forgot about their cows and goats and other animals that they were herding. So they were so absorbed in playing, they did not notice that the cows began to wander away from them. The cows were looking for more grass, and since no one was watching them, they entered a dense forest. So Shukadev Goswami is explaining to Parikshit Maharaj that these goats, the cows, the buffaloes eventually wandered so far away from Krishna and Balaram that they became entrapped in a forest that happened to have a forest fire start. Fires are very thirsty. Anything that is dry and tinder, they just gobble up very, very quickly. So the cows and the other animals started to cry out in distress. It's only when the animals try to cry out in distress do the boys wake up and realize none of the animals are next to them. So not seeing the cows before them, Krishna and Balaram and the cowherd boys suddenly felt a pang of anxiety. They felt guilty that they had neglected. After all, their primary duty and responsibility was to take care of the animals. That is why they were leaving the house early in the morning. And after all the pasturing was done, they were coming back right before sunset. So they felt a deep sense of remorse that they had neglected their animals, and they started searching for them. But they couldn't figure out where they had gone. And they realized, okay, maybe we can trace the hoof prints of the cows, not on sand, but on the blades of grass, that the cows would have left an imprint or broken grasses here and there, or they would have munched on grass here and there. So some of the grass tendrils would be shorter than the other. And so using this method of trying to locate the cows, they were in a great deal of anxiety because they thought cows are their means of livelihood, not just for their parents, but for them as well, as a great source of joy and contentment. So they were thinking like this, perhaps they will get into trouble with their parents for losing the cattle. So there is a forest called the Munja forest. Finally, as they enter the Munja forest, the cowherd boys locate their valuable cows. And these cows were crying out in distress because of the nearby forest fire. So slowly the boys herd the cows back to the path in which they were meant to be. And what does the Lord do? The Lord calls out to his cows by their name. And when the Lord calls out to the cows by their name, Shukadev Goswami says the Lord's voice was like that of a rumbling cloud, deep and resonant. And the cows were so happy to hear the Lord calling for them. They were just very, very, very happily just bouncing around and running towards the Lord, responding to his call. And then the fire engulfs all around them, and it was threatening to destroy everything. And what do the boys do? They cry out to Krishna. They say, hey Krishna, hey Balaram, please protect us. We are all about to die. We are all about to be swallowed by this forest fire. And so the boys cry out to the Lord. They tell the Lord, you are so powerful. We've seen you defeat demons. Won't you save your devotees? Your devotees are about to be destroyed. After all, as your devotees, we've already taken shelter at your lotus feet. So it's your duty to protect us. Certainly, you're not going to allow your own friends to be destroyed. We have already accepted you as the Supreme Lord. Our souls are already surrendered to you, Krishna. Hearing these pitiful words from his friends, the Lord simply tells them, I heard your prayer. Just close your eyes and do not be afraid. So generally, if there is a fire all around you, and if somebody tells you to close your eyes, you would think something is wrong with that instruction, because you are certainly going to be destroyed if you close your eyes. But the boys had so much faith in Krishna and Balaram that all of them just closed their eyes immediately. The minute the Lord said, just close your eyes and do not be afraid, the Lord said. So the boys said, okay, and they closed their eyes. And what does the Lord do? He just opens his mouth wide and swallows the fire, and thus saving his friends from danger. And then the Lord asks them to open their eyes. And when they opened their eyes, like magic, there was no fire. So everybody had been saved. The cows, the goats, the buffaloes, the cowherd boys. And somehow or the other, what was mystical is that not only did Krishna swallow the fire, but as they closed their eyes, he had transported back all of them back to the Bhandira tree, where they were having this pastime with Pralambasura. How did the Lord do that? So the boys were simply astonished. They were not in the same place where the fire had happened. Everyone had been moved to a place of safety. So they were back to that same tree where they were having the tug of war game going on. And when they saw that they had all been saved, they were thinking, maybe Krishna is a great devata. So now how do you understand? Because in a moment of panic, you cry out to the Lord, right? It's just natural instinct. When you're threatened and when your safety is at stake, the first thing you do is cry out to the Lord. So once they were safe, they again thought, oh, Krishna must be a great personality. He must be a great devata or something. He has such power within him. So they were just thinking, how did Krishna get all of this power? So one minute they were praying to the Lord, next minute they forgot he was the Lord. As soon as they had been rescued, right? Isn't that our condition too? When things go wrong, we remember the Lord. When everything is going smooth, we're not able to think of Krishna that much, right? Even when we're chanting, we're not able to think of Krishna. So they were just wondering about this. So it was late afternoon. And so now Krishna and Balaram, they turn the cows and head back home. And what is Krishna doing? He's playing his flute. And as he's playing his flute, all of his friends are following him. The cows, the calves, everybody is following him. And they enter back into Vrindavan. And the gopis are filled with pleasure because their heart was burning with separation throughout the day, thinking about Krishna. And now that they see Govinda coming home, to them it seemed like they had lost him for hundreds of years. So like this, pastimes were continuing. During the daytime, pastimes with the cowherd boys. During the night, evening hours, pastimes with the gopis. I mentioned yesterday that Shukadev Goswami describes the beauty of Vrindavan so nicely. And we came across some of those descriptions yesterday in the pastimes with Pralambasur. But one entire chapter is dedicated to descriptions of the beauty of Vrindavan. So in chapter 20 of Canto 10, Shukadev Goswami talks about both the rainy season and the autumn season in Vrindavan. Right? Yesterday it was summertime when we were talking about the pastime of Pralambasura. And even though it was so hot, the Vrajavasis were very, very comfortable. Why? Because the Lord was there. They were not experiencing the scorching heat, but all of the deities were trying to compete with each other to serve the Lord, the sun, the wind, the water, the trees, the plants. So every single Jivatma, their only interest is they want to serve Krishna. So in this chapter, we will just briefly look at the descriptions that Shukadev Goswami gives of this beautiful Vrindavan. But as he does that, as he's constructing his description of Vrindavan, within the description is an instruction for the Jivatmas. He uses metaphors, and we'll go through some of those metaphors that Shukadev Goswami uses. So Shukadev Goswami is speaking to Parikshit Maharaj. He's saying, what happened as Krishna and Balaram are coming back that particular day? The boys are so eager. What do children do when they come home? The first thing they tell the mother is everything that happened in school. The teacher did this and this child did that, and like that. So similarly, the boys were eagerly sharing what all had happened. And what were they narrating? Krishna Katha. They were saying how wonderful it was that this small boy who came as a Gopa, as Pralamba, actually turned out to be a demon. And somehow or the other, Balaram just, broke open his head like as easy as breaking a coconut. And then they talked about the forest fire. And so the cowherd men and ladies were amazed to hear all of these pastimes. So every day they are hearing, Krishna did this, Balaram did this. And so even the Vrajavasis began to think, there's something special about these two boys, Krishna and Balaram. How fortunate they are that they have devatas amongst their midst. So again, they were thinking of Krishna and Balaram as powerful devatas and not as the personalities of Godhead. So summer has ended and now rainy season has begun. And when there is rain, everything gets life. Everything is suffused with life. Right? So the sky begins to rumble with thunder and lightning, and it is covered with dense blue clouds. And I will give you some examples of how Shukadev Goswami uses metaphors as he's describing nature. I'm not reading the Sanskrit shloka. I'm just going to talk about the English translation. So in one of the shlokas, Shukadev Goswami says, thus the sky and its natural illumination were covered in the same way that the spirit soul is covered by the three modes of material nature. Right? Just as clouds and thunder and lightning were covering the sky, in the same way, the Jivatma is covered by the three gunas, Sattvagun, Rajagun, and Tamogun. And then he talks about how everything begins releasing its wealth. He says the sun had absorbed the wealth from the earth for 8 months. And now it was the turn of the water to release itself everywhere. Right? And then one more metaphor that Shukadev Goswami uses is that flashing with lightning, great clouds were shaken and swept about by fierce winds. Just like merciful persons, the clouds gave their lives for the pleasure of this world. Right? It's like the clouds were giving up all of their water. The water belongs to the clouds. But the clouds are so merciful they were freely giving up their water for the pleasure of the rest of the Jivatmas. Just as great devotees give of themselves for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord and for the pleasure of the Jivatmas. They sacrifice themselves to take the Jivatmas back to Krishna, just as the clouds sacrifice the water for the pleasure of the other Jivatmas. So the earth has become fully nourished as it is moistened by the god of rain. And like this, Shukadev Goswami is using one more metaphor. And he says, thus the earth was like a person whose body has been emaciated. Emaciated means become very weak and frail. Thus the earth was like a person whose body has been emaciated by austerities, undergone for a material purpose, but who again becomes fully nourished when he achieves the fruit of those austerities. So Shukadev Goswami is given an example of using the earth being parched, and then when it's drenched with the rain, it comes back to life. So similarly, a person undergoing austerities deprive themselves of certain things for a greater purpose. And when do they become satisfied? They become satisfied when the purpose of their austerities is fulfilled. When they receive the results, they feel fulfilled. So similarly, the glowworms are shining and glowing in the night. And Shukadev Goswami says, just as in the age of Kali, the predominance of sinful activities allows atheistic doctrines to overshadow the true knowledge of the Vedas. So the glowworms are compared to the stars here. You know, the glowworms here in this case are the atheistic people. The glowworm only burns for a few seconds and then the fire is extinguished. So similarly, the atheists may think they will dominate the surface of this earth, but they will only be there for a few years. Ultimately, the stars will predominate, which means ultimately the Vedic knowledge will conquer. So it always has to be re-established. And here, Shukadev Goswami also speaks about the frogs that were silent up till now, but suddenly when the raining season comes, they all begin croaking. The minute they hear the thunder and lightning, the frogs begin to croak. And Shukadev Goswami says, in the same way, the Brahmanas, the students, what do? They wake up early in the morning and they begin chanting their mantras that they've been taught by their teachers. So they begin to recite their lessons. So just like the frogs are croaking, the Brahmanas are awake now. The Gokul boys are awake. They're performing their morning duties in silence, and then they begin to recite the Vedic mantras that they have been taught. So like this, through many, many shlokas, Shukadev Goswami is giving examples of nature blooming and comparing it to something else for the Jivatmas. Right? So for example, when Shukadev Goswami says, when the rain has drenched all of the land, suddenly there is an outburst of growth of green grass. And he says it's as if the earth has become green emerald. And then mushrooms, wild mushrooms are growing everywhere. And these Indragopa insects are buzzing all over the place. You know, they are that reddish, the insects with a red covering. So it's as if a person has suddenly become rich. The earth has suddenly become rich with all of these growth and insects and mushrooms growing wildly. And like this, every creature on land, in air, in the water, was taking advantage of these rains that were coming. And just as a devotee becomes beautiful by engaging in the service of the Lord, These different creatures were keeping themselves busy with the different sevas now that the rain had come. So just as the rivers join the ocean and the ocean is agitated, similarly, the mind of an immature yogi becomes agitated because he still hasn't grappled with his sensual attractions. Then in one of the shlokas, Shukadev Goswami says, in the 15th shloka of chapter 20, Shukadev Goswami says, just as devotees whose minds are absorbed in the personality of Godhead remain peaceful even when attacked by all sorts of dangers, the mountains in the rainy season were not at all disturbed by the repeated striking of the rain-bearing clouds. So how the mountain stays calm, the devotees whose minds are absorbed in Krishna also stay calm, even though externally they may be attacked by so many different sensual attractions. So a devotee stays protected as long as their mind is absorbed in Krishna. So like this, Shukadev Goswami is spending a lot of time describing nature. And in almost every single shloka, he uses nature to describe some aspect of a Jivatma's life. So everything is looking beautiful in Vrindavan. And as the gopis see Krishna coming back, they begin to think about other things and other pastimes. So Krishna was very, very happy. Balaram was equally happy. And the Gopa boys were so happy to spend such quality time with Krishna. So now it is the gopis' turn. The gopis were wondering how fortunate these boys are to spend so much time with the Gopas during the day. But they were happy for the Gopas, right? Their heart had been stolen by Krishna. And as long as they could see Krishna and hear his pastimes, they felt they were in his presence. So this is what the gopis were also experiencing. And that brings us to chapter 21, which is the very famous Venugit. Here, the gopis are glorifying Krishna's flute and his playing of his flute. So when they hear the Lord playing his flute, they have this discussion among themselves. So Shukadev Goswami explains that as Balaram and Krishna, every day they were entering the forest, they will begin to herd their cows, and either Balaram or Krishna would play on their flutes. And the young girls in the village could hear this flute sound, could hear Krishna playing beautiful tunes. And they begin to have a conversation among themselves, talking about Krishna's qualities and the great fortune that this flute had. So they're having this conversation among themselves. And like this, they were thinking of Krishna. And so they say, just see the good fortune of this flute. This flute that captivates the minds of everyone, including Cupid. How fortunate is he? What has he done to get the lips of Krishna? Don't the lips of Krishna only belong to us? How did the flute get the good fortune of being at his lips all the time? And then see, the flute here is described as follows, where the mother is the river Yamuna and the father is the bamboo tree. So they're saying, look at how proud Yamuna is, that her son has landed at the lips of the dear Lord. And very rarely does Krishna not have the flute at his lips. So how fortunate is this flute, this young flute, that he's got this seva that even we cannot get. So slowly the gopis begin to describe Krishna and Balaram and how charming they are. They are decorated with the peacock flowers. There are lotuses and lilies decorating their ears, their hair. And how beautifully Krishna and Balaram are shining among the Gopa boys. Look how beautifully they dance. And sometimes the lordships also sing to entertain the Gopas. And so much love that the Gopas have for Krishna. And in this way, they are saying that Vrindavan Dham is spreading the glory of the earth because the earth is so satisfied that the lotus feet of the Lord is stepping all over Mother Earth. And the peacocks go mad when they see Krishna, especially when they hear him playing the flute. And not just the peacocks, the calves that are drinking milk, when they hear Krishna's flute, they become stupefied. They forget to drink the milk and their ears are all straight up, simply hearing Krishna's flute. And the milk is dribbling down their cheeks because they have forgotten. And the gopis say, even the foolish deer, look how easily they are approaching Nanda Maharaj's son. How gorgeously he's dressed, he's playing his flute, and the deer is always attracted to the sound of flute. And they are just gazing upon the Lord with tears in their eyes. So Krishna's beauty, Shukadev Goswami is saying, is like a festival for all the women in Rajabhumi. Not just his beauty, but his pastimes and his character and his qualities are like a festival celebration for the gopis there. So much so, it is not just the gopis. Sometimes when the demigods' wives were traveling in their aircrafts with their husbands, and they happened to catch sight of Krishna in Rajabhumi, playing his flute, their hearts would just be shaken up. They would become so bewildered by the sight that they almost fainted with unconsciousness. So like this, the cows, the deer, the peacock, the demigods' wives, everybody was just stunned by the beauty of Krishna and by the beauty of his playing various notes and songs through the flute. So slowly their mind is being drawn to Krishna. Simply by Krishna playing his flute, they could hear his flute, and this way they were able to think about the Lord, think about his pastimes, think about his beauty, think about the good fortune of the Gopa boys, their own good fortune that they had an opportunity to serve the Lord when he came back. So they are thinking of Krishna and Balaram and how everything looks so beautiful in Vrindavan because of the presence of these two personalities. So even Shukadev Goswami talks about other women in the forest, and Prabhupada translates this as the aborigine women. That means these must be women who are forest dwellers, right? As opposed to village dwellers who are a little bit more refined maybe. So even this aborigine women of Vrindavan, they become disturbed, sensually disturbed. How? When they see Krishna's lotus feet imprints on the grass. So Krishna's feet has been placed on the chest of the gopis, and the gopis have covered their chest with this reddish kumkuma powder. And because Krishna has placed his lotus feet on the chest of the gopis, when he was walking on the grass, he was leaving behind imprints, red imprints on the grass. Just seeing the footprint of Krishna like this, the Aborigine girls would also be very, very disturbed. And then the gopis describe Govardhan Hill. And they tell each other, you know, best of all of the devotees is actually Govardhan Hill. Why? Because they say, my dear friends, this hill is supplying Krishna and Balaram, along with their calves and cows and cowherd friends, with all kinds of necessities. How are they serving the Lord? They have little streams running down Govardhan Hill here and there. So when the boys and the cows are thirsty, they can just quench their thirst. The grass is very soft. So when the Lord walks around Govardhan Hill, his lotus feet are so protected. There are beautiful caves within Govardhan Hill. If the boys want to rest and find a cooler place or play some games, then the caves are so attractive. Then there are beautiful trees that are flowering so many different fruits and flowers and vegetables. If the boys ever get hungry or they want to decorate Krishna and Balaram, all of this is being supplied by Govardhan Hill. In this way, Govardhan Hill is the best devotee of the Supreme Lord. And that is why the Lord puts his lotus feet on Govardhan Hill every day when he takes the cows out for pasturing. And this is why Govardhan Hill appears so jubilant, because the Lord's lotus footprint are on him every day. Now, of course, we understand that Govardhan Hill is also Krishna himself. But here, Govardhan Hill is being accepted as a best servant of the Lord, because he is serving Krishna and Balaram completely in so many different ways, unlimitedly, simply for the pleasure of Krishna and Balaram. So like this, the gopis are describing, even though they had not gone out to pasture with the gopas, still they seem to know what all pastimes the Lord was performing with the gopas through their imagination. How the Lord was, tying the cow's hind legs in order to milk the cow. Like this, they were narrating all of the playful pastimes of Krishna as he was wandering away from them into the Vrindavan forest. And in this way, Shukadev Goswami concludes this particular chapter by saying that the gopis became fully absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. This sets the stage where the gopis are thinking, these are the younger gopis, are thinking, Krishna is the best. There's nobody like him. So each gopi was thinking to herself, we want Krishna as our husband. So this sets the stage for the next Leela, which we will cover tomorrow. So please do join us. Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki
Sure.